The British in India, 1765, 1905. During the second half of the 18th century, the British East India Company steadily expanded its dominions on the Indian subcontinent. At this stage, it had no plans for the conquest of India, but viewed its role as primarily commercial. Territories were only annexed to protect the company's commercial interests. For example, when for example, when Tipu Sahib of For example, when Tipu Sahib of Mysore invaded the British protectorate of Travancore in 1789, Lord Cornwallis, the Governor-General, declared war and ended up taking control of half Tipu's territory. Expansion. The threat of an invasion of India by Napoleon prompted a more proactive British policy. Mysore was defeated in 1799, annexed in 1831, and the Maratha Confederacy was conquered in 1818. Annexed territories included Kumaon and Ceylon, both 1815. Peshwa's lands, 1818, and Chota Nagpur, 1833. Independent states such as
Hyderabad, Rajputana, Kashmir.
Independent states such as Hyderabad, Rajputana, and Kashmir were reduced to dependencies, with British troops garrisoned on their territory. From 1848 Lord
Dalhousie.
From 1848, Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General, followed the policy of lapse. When a Hindu prince died without heir, his lands automatically passed to the company. The British acquired several new territories in the course of military campaigns to protect India's borders to the northwest and east. To secure the northwest frontier from the possibility of Russian incursion, the company twice attempted to take control of Afghanistan. In both the First and Second Afghan Wars, British occupied Kabul, but failed to dominate the rest of the country. The northwest frontier of British India was, however, extended with the conquest of
Sind.
Sindh. And after two wars with the Sikhs, the Punjab, in response to a threat from Burma in the east, the company took over Assam, Arakan, and Tenasserim, 1824-1826. Burma was brought under full British control in 1886. The Indian Mutiny. The Indian Mutiny.
Mutiny.
The East India Company was successful in defending India from external threats, but was often less sure-footed in its dealings with India's people. The prohibition of local costumes and traditions under
Custom.
the prohibition of local customs and traditions under Lord Bentinck, Governor General 1828-1835, the practice of Christian conversion and the insistence on English as the language of education and commerce all contributed to growing discontent among Indians. This flared into a full-scale rebellion known as the Indian Mutiny in 1857. The uprising began in one of the company's native armies, the Bengal
Bengal Sepoys.
the Bengal Sepoys, who were stationed in
Meerut, Delhi.
Meerut, near Delhi. A rumor spread among Hindu and Muslim soldiers that the rifle cartridges, which they had to buy to open, had been greased with pork and beef fat, which would have violated the dietary laws of both religions. The rebellion spread quickly through northern and central India. Delhi was captured and two other cities besieged. However, the rebels were poorly organized with few weapons, and by 1859 they had been defeated. Nevertheless, the rebellion sent shockwaves through British India and caused widespread changes. The first and most noticeable change came in 1858. The East India Company was dissolved and the British government began to rule India directly. There were also other, less overt changes.
overt,
Overt changes. A mutual distrust tinged
tinged,
a mutual distrust tinged relations between the rulers and the indigenous population from the time on. The Anglo-Indian community became more insular and disconnected from the native population. Gurkha and Sikh troops who had remained loyal during the rebellion formed the core of the reformed British Indian Army.
Raj,
The Raj, the period in which India was ruled directly by the British government, is known as the Raj. In the administration of its territories, the East India Company had already introduced British-style institutions, including a British judicial system. The process of westernization gathered pace during the Raj. Railway, telephone, and telegraph networks were constructed, irrigation schemes expanded, and universities established. Indians were educated in the principles of a competitive market economy and Protestant values. However, in many ways, Britain's economic interests would not have been well served by transforming India into a fully westernized nation. In fact, the British did little to promote industrialization on the subcontinent, aware that India's primary purpose was to supply raw materials for British manufacturers, particularly cotton for the textile industry, and to provide a captive market for British goods. The other resource that India had in abundance was people. Thousands of Indian men served as soldiers, defending the British Empire around the world. Indian nationalism. After the Indian Mutiny, Indians were increasingly denied a role in the administration of their country. Many began to desire a more representative form of government. The Indian National Congress was founded in 1885, initially to promote the cause of Indians within the empire. However, by the early 1900s, it had emerged as the major voice of Indian nationalist aspirations. Calling for a government and constitution that reflected the will of the entire population. Soon, this demand would evolve into a movement to end British rule in India. Timeline: 1803-1818, Second Maratha War ends in defeat of Maratha Confederacy. 1813, Christian missionaries are licensed to preach in India. Licensed to preach in India.
missionaries,
Missionaries, Christian missionaries are licensed to preach in India. 1835, English is made the language of education. 1836, a major road building program begins. 1853, the first railway in India opens in Bombay. 1876, Queen Victoria is given the title of Empress of India. 1876, 1878, 5 million died from famine in the central and southern provinces. 1909, the Morley Minto constitutional reforms introduced a measure of democratic government, but Indians are still denied true political representation. Jean Vidal Bokassa. Jean Vidal Bokassa.
Jane.
To the French who had once ruled the Central African Republic,
Colonel.
Colonel Jean Vidal Bokassa must at first have seemed a good bet, for it was soon clear after he seized power in 1966 that he longed to be more French than they. He worshipped de Gaulle and Napoleon and tried to set up in his capital of
Bangui.
Bangui, the sort of art, ballet, and opera societies characteristic of a French provincial town. He made concessions to French companies, allowed the French army a base, and entertained French President
Giscard d'Estaing.
Giscard d'Estaing several times on his own private game reserve, which occupied most of the eastern half of the country. He was also extremely generous with gifts, particularly of diamonds, one of the few commodities his dirt poor country produced. By 1977, though, even the French must have begun to suspect that this ugly, violent little man was beginning to lose touch with reality. For, spurred on by constant viewings of a film of the coronation of Britain's Queen Elizabeth II, he decided to emulate his hero Napoleon and have himself crowned emperor. He even ordered a dozen prisoners held in Bangui jail to be released from the general prison population and given exercise and preparations in the run up to the $20 million show. French diplomats and businessmen, for all these, were among those who gratefully accepted invitations, and they were welcomed by brand new Mercedes limousines paid for via French government credit. They attended the comic opera coronation, and after the ceremonial parade, in which Bokassa rode in a gold carriage drawn by 8 white horses over the only 2 miles of paved road in his capital, they assembled at his palace for a banquet. Little knowing, little knowing that among the delicacies served up to them on specially ordered Limoges porcelain were that what remained of the Bangui jail prisoners. It still took the French 2 years to move against Bokassa, who by that time had run mad. He'd become obsessed, for example, by the fact that the barefoot children of Bangui's only high school had no civilized French style uniforms. So he jailed them and then had them one by one. Here's the General Bokassa. Jean Bedel Bokassa. Bokassa allegedly fed his enemies to his pet crocodiles. Beaten to death when they failed to show up at uniform inspections properly dressed. When news of this reached the French embassy, they were finally forced to act. As Bokassa was leaving his empire for a state visit to Libya, an opposition politician was shaken awake in Paris and bundled on a plane to Bangui. Where he called upon the French Foreign Legion troops who were hard upon his heels to aid the people in Bokassa's overthrow. The legionnaires soon uncovered the mass grave where the school children had been buried in the grounds of Bangui jail. The bones of another 37 were found at the bottom of the swimming pool in Bokassa's palace. They'd been fed to his 4 pet crocodiles. In the palace kitchen were the half-eaten remains of another dozen victims who'd been on the emperor's menu in the days before his departure. Bokassa first took refuge in the Ivory Coast in West Africa, but he soon showed up in a chateau in a Parisian suburb where he entered a new career as a supplier of safari suits to African boutiques.
Suits.
President Giscard d'Estaing, meanwhile, made a personal donation to a Bangui charity school of $20,000, which he said was the value of the diamonds Bokassa had given him. Thank you so much for joining me to this reading, and I will see you tomorrow, perhaps most likely. Thank you so much.